You know, I've known you personally for a long time, Faisal, and you have helped us on this program in the past when there have been difficult moments for London's Muslim community. But I have to tell you, it's difficult to know where to start on this one today. How are you?
Oh, I'm okay. I mean, you know the community as well, Heather. You've been here a long time and you know our community. And for your audience that doesn't know, London has the highest per capita of Muslims in this country. We have about 13% of the population, 35,000 Muslims. We have about 45 different cultural ethnic groups, including about 25 different languages. So the fact that an entire 3 generations of a Muslim family literally died because of their religious beliefs is extremely sad and heartbreaking.
Yes. Tell me about yesterday for you and what you experienced as the events sort of unfolded, and then suddenly we got a full appreciation of exactly what had happened.
Well, I guess to give some context, so, I mean, this isn't the first time our community has, been under siege, so to speak. So, we went through, Islamophobia and racism and hate crimes, threats against people, women having their hijabs torn off after 9/11 in the malls, mosques being defaced, death threats if we went to pray. And then we got through 9/11, and it's important for your viewers to know how important their support was, because every denomination, every religious group, every ethnic group, every cultural group came out and showed their support and love, which was extremely important to us. And then, of course, a few years ago, we went through Quebec, where there was a slaughter, and we went through New Zealand. So we started in New Zealand, and then, that's away from us. That doesn't happen in Canada. We end up in Quebec, and now we end up in London. So where this happened is literally a mile from my house. And I passed that area probably within a couple of hours of what had occurred on my way home. So it was, we didn't know what happened in the community. It was reported that it was a collision and 5 people were struck and 4 people died, but it didn't make sense to me, because how could that many people die with a collision? But it wasn't a collision, and we now know that it was, for lack of a better term, a mass killing.
Which is how the mayor referred to it, and London's police chief was very clear and very quick to identify this as being premeditated and intentional and a family targeted because of religious beliefs. The Prime Minister used an interesting word, I thought, in his statement, Faisal, which was insidious, as in a hate that is gradual and subtle and invisible until the consequences present, often with devastating effects. I'm wondering, where does this hate come from, do you think?
Well, it's interesting, as usual, you pick up on things that other people don't. I heard the same language, and I think in my own mind, because I've seen enough of this, not just with our community. I mean, we're suffering through the Indigenous community, what's going on with murders in their community, where, because of their culture, what they're being subjected to. Black Lives Matter, people being shot because of the color of their skin, and now Muslims are being killed because of their beliefs. So I've thought about it a bit, Heather, and I think that hate is a disease that can only exist where there's absolutely no understanding or humanity. And I'm sad to say, unfortunately, that I think the cancer of hatred lives well amongst a few of us. And that's the shocking part, that I don't think this young man who's 20 years old woke up one morning and said, I hate Muslims. I think we're going to find that there's a history somewhere in there. I blame a lot of people that are complicit. I blame social media. I blame analytics. I blame the right-wing extremist culture of hate and violence. There's blame to go around for everybody. So, the problem is not what's happened to us. The problem is, how are we going to deal with this?
So that's my next question. What is the correct response? How do you get from a place of ugliness and darkness to what you just said, a place of understanding and humanity, or of love and justice? What is the path?
I think it's very simple. Whether you're Muslim or Christian or Jewish, we can look at the prophets, we can look at at all of those great men of religion, where we have to bring light where there's darkness, as Martin Luther King said. So I don't think just talking about it is enough. I think we have to put our faith, all of us put our faith, and if you're not a person of faith, your spirituality into action. And in London, we've been doing that for 110 years. We have given millions of dollars to Men's Mission, Salvation Army. During Ramadan, we feed those that need to be fed and clothe those that need to be clothed and house those that need to be housed. So I think people need to see is that vast majority of the silent have to be vocal. And I think we're going to find out with this young man that a lot of people knew how he felt about Muslims, and they chose to be silent. And that's a problem. So we have to bring all of this out from the darkness and shine a light on it. Yes. And we have to understand that, we have a choice to make, and the choice is very simple. We can allow these murders to divide and conquer us, or we can come together as we did in 9/11. We can love each other, we can support each other, and we can be there for one another. And people in London know that the Muslim community, with its over a century of contributions, this community is better with us than without us. And we're going to work very, very hard to make sure that we don't feed this fuel or oxygen for hatred and violence.
The police investigation continues, as you mentioned. So far, they're saying the suspect, the 20-year-old from London, had no known ties to any hate groups, no online profile, but obviously they are going to continue to probe. Let me tap into your legal expertise. Faisal is a lawyer with a leading law firm in London. There is discussion of terrorism charges here, whether they would be appropriate. And for people to understand, usually in these cases that police don't pursue terrorism charges because there has to be evidence, as I understand it, Faisal, that they are ideologically driven, meant to intimidate. So it gets to questions of motivation, and the burden on prosecution is greater, but it doesn't necessarily do anything in terms of the sentence at the end. What do you think? Should there be the pursuit of terrorism charges in this case?
It's a good question. I am familiar with those sections. I actually, when there were amendments to those provisions after 9/11 and various other things, that I made positions known on my view on the law to the House of Commons and to the Senate. So you are correct. There have to be important components of ideologically. They have to be motive-driven, either for religious, political, or ideological, and meant to intimidate. It's very hard to prove. So there's some shyness from the Crown attorneys in this country to pull away from it a little bit because it is harder to prove. You don't need it to get a conviction. But just like this being everybody coming out and saying this is a hate crime, it acknowledges the problem. And, there isn't just foreign terrorism, there is domestic terrorism, and we have domestic terrorism. I don't yet have a view as to whether that charge should be laid yet or not because I haven't seen the evidence. I'm sure that there is some evidence out there, and if there is, so be it. It will be a terrorism charge. But I think we have to wait a little bit, Heather, until we see what evidence they have. And maybe because they haven't seen him on social media, but he may have been under a different name. There may be people that know other things that are being quiet right now. So there may be enough to do that charge. And I do know who the Crown Attorney is in London that'll be dealing with this case. I have an immense amount of respect for her and the police that are investigating. So it's the London Police Department with the RCMP, and they're quite familiar federally with the RCMP with terrorism charges. And I think the right decision will be made. It's not necessary, but I do think it's leaning that way.
Share a closing thought, if you would, so we don't end on a sort of a technical discussion of the law. Maybe, I don't know, conversations that you're having with friends, neighbors, your family, and a closing thought for us this morning.
Well, unfortunately, history continues to repeat itself, and we don't seem to be learning from it. And like I said, it's not just as important as to what's happened to London in this situation, but we've had these situations, and it keeps getting closer and closer from New Zealand, and now a mile from my home. That could have been my children. It could have been my relatives. It's a small community. We know everybody here. But we are going to respond. We are being tested, Heather. There's a favorite verse of mine in the Quran, and it's similar in the Bible or in the Torah. that says God made you into nations and tribes so that you would know each other, not despise each other. And one of my favorite songs in the Black Gospels spirituals is to close with, "We shall overcome." And we're very appreciative of the support of people like yourself, the entire country, the entire world. And we're going to pull through this. We will overcome it. But we got to stop having these kinds of discussions because there's no need. We're trying to make sense out of the senseless, and we're not going to be able to do it. We have to stamp it out.